I used to think it was 100%. How do I get back to 100? Let's get this fully charged, no cracks or flaws. And so I'd wait. I'd rest, I would prepare. But guess what? Aiming for 100% is a perpetual almost there. Turns out life doesn't care much about 100%. It wants to know what you can do when you're at 80. Can you find a way to push through when you are at 75%? How about 65? See, life is innately difficult. How do you handle that? How do you compartmentalize it? I was recently back in Boston, running around the Charles River, first time in a while. Felt a little back spasm reoccurring. That right knee, a little sensitive as it often is, and I thought, man, again, if I waited for perfection to run, I would never run again. I can count on one hand the times everything felt great. Light bulb moment. We work towards that. We aim high, we give the body what it needs, but we also understand perfect is more of an idea than a reality. Sometimes you just have to lace up the shoes and go. Just like sometimes you have to wake up even though you're tired. Walk into the room even though you're nervous. Make the change even though you're fearful. Cut ties even though you're sad or disappointed. There is no 100% that is going to come down and save you. Life will always provide the necessary ingredients to climb, to grow, and achieve. It does, though, leave it up to you to decide how bad you want it. So what's the plan? To wait until you're 100%? Until everything is perfect and you're living the problem-free life you dreamt of? Or is this a find a way now type thing? An acknowledgement that we aren't given perfection, but we are given enough to move forward anyway. An understanding that while most view discomfort as an end, greatness means seeing it as an invitation, an unavoidable cost to move into the realm of accomplishment. So while the rest of the world waits for their 100%, I dare you to conquer your adversaries while at 80. I challenge you to surprise yourself while at 70, to disrupt the status quo while at 65. There is no waiting here. There is no serenity in growth, and how could there be? Growth is a restructuring of comfort, a tearing down to build again. Yeah, I used to think it was 100%, but now I know waiting for that 100 just becomes hope and stagnation. No, we cross finish lines and reach mountaintops while manufacturing momentum and creating possibility. Yeah, anyone can succeed at 100%, but seldom do we get there. Seldom do we see that. So that leaves us with this simple question. What will you do where you are with what you have? What will you do now? So imagine you're sitting down, having something to eat, thinking, relaxing, reading, whatever you're doing. And someone walks up to the table across from you, pulls out the chair, sits down, kind of leans back, puts one leg over the other. Casually tells you, you probably don't have what it takes to do anything significant in your life. What would you say? It'd be outrageous, right? That's a ridiculous scenario. Well, let's say that the next day you get up, you go to walk, run, work out, and he shows up again. Starts running next to you, casually reminding you that the odds of you changing, doing anything for the better, are slim to none, that this is kind of a waste of time for you. You brush it off, you go to work, and guess who, right? He passes by your desk, leaves a little note saying, that your bosses, your higher-ups, they're cut from a different cloth. They just see things in a way you can't. You'd probably tell that person to take a long walk off a short pier, right? Or at the very least, you'd understand how absolutely insane the situation is. People can't just walk up and talk to you like that. But now imagine that same person is you, living rent-free in your head, and here's the catch: you invited him in. You allowed the negativity and the doubt to live there. See, every time I think about that self-talk, I can't help but wonder, in a world of obstacles to navigate and challenges to tackle, why is it acceptable for your biggest obstacle to be you? Why should you allow or be okay with that? And I'm not saying everything's perfect all the time, every thought's pure bliss, but I am posing this question. If you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect anyone else to? If you're not your biggest ally, if you don't respect the person staring back at you in the mirror, how do you expect the world to? Why is our inclination to tense up and refute the negativity from others, but sit back and accept the same nonsense in our own heads? If those words don't support what you're trying to build, I don't care who they're from, where they come from, why they're there, they don't deserve your time. And it's a simple awareness that they are not truth, but merely your fears and your insecurities trying to stop you from becoming who you might be. My biggest leaps in life, they didn't come from physical milestones or benchmarks. They came from mental shifts, convincing myself, believing myself, trusting in myself. When the road is untraveled, when the story is untold, the positive and the negative are both make-believe. They are both fairy tales, they're options, they're theories, and guess what? You get to choose which option, which one will be yours. My favorite quote is, "You are always stronger than you think you are." Not so much because it reiterates how high the bar is, but because it reminds me how low we often set it for ourselves when we're not paying attention, how loud that negative voice can be. You know, when I was unemployed, I was writing, I was running out of money, my life changed because I stopped seeing myself as some lost, jobless mess, and I started seeing myself as one of the greats with a hell of a road to travel. See, people always follow through on who they believe themselves to be. I refused to hear that you might fail and the not good enough, and I buckled up for the road ahead. And when you believe you can change, and know that the road to your goals will be rocky, it will be uncomfortable, but worth it, you are taking that hostile voice and making him or her a spectator, not a decider of fate. And yeah, you will lose, you can't win all the time, and you will feel stuck, but life's not always smooth sailing, and sure, you'll be mad at yourself, but not every decision is a home run. But these situations are the byproduct of a journey, and here is my point. Self-belief is being able to differentiate your situation and pointless negative talk about the situation. It's about remembering that you are the gatekeeper of your own mind. When you believe in you, it places your faith, your strength, and your determination in the driver's seat. It makes everything else trivial, meaningless. It makes it an option that you are simply not going to choose. The world reflects back at us what we currently are, like a giant mirror projecting the movie that's playing in our heads. We lay on the horn in traffic, not when we're at peace with ourselves, but when we're in duress. We gravitate towards the negative, not when we're living in abundance, but when we're living in scarcity. We quit, retreat, contract, not when we're confident in the road ahead, but when we're doubtful, alarmed. In other words, we find out in the world what already lives within us. Life, in many ways, is not absolute, it's evidence. It's evidence that we'll use to justify the things we already believe. Wayne Dyer used to use the metaphor of an orange. It can be squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, but there will never be grapefruit juice pouring out of an orange. No, grapefruit juice doesn't live there. You can only find on the outside what lives in the inside. You can only extract from the orange juice. Recently, a good friend of mine said to me that they'd like to change their financial situation. To which my response was, perfect. You most certainly can, right? Like anything, yeah, it'll take work and some planning and some restructuring, all that good stuff, but you most definitely can. And his response was, sure, that's what all you motivational people say. Okay, smart guy. Now you're an example on a podcast episode. Congrats. Why? Because you want the people around you to realize how much is possible for themselves, right? It's not sorcery or witchcraft to believe something better is possible. In fact, if one doesn't believe it's possible, they're effectively cementing their feet to the ground, at least with regard to that particular pursuit. Let's face it, you don't begin journeys that are not possible. We don't allow ourselves to do that. And so, to not believe in an outcome and somehow still wish for that outcome, well, that's essentially our orange metaphor, right? Can't squeeze financial freedom out of a mindset that only sees monetary constraint. Believing it's possible starts the journey. See, there's so much pragmatism in growth. You know, people talk a lot about the law of attraction, and yeah, I get it, right? It sets targets. But the picture of, let's say, a dream house on your wall is not why you'll eventually have the dream house. The picture of the dream house on the wall reminds you. It helps you believe that you're someone capable of someday acquiring that house, obtaining that type of success, which results in you, wait for it, doing things that help bring that to life. It is the doing. But that doing must be connected to belief. Mid-20s. I was unhappy, wanted more, but didn't really believe myself capable of obtaining more, right? That was the issue. Back to the old orange expecting grapefruit juice. Can't get results in an area not conducive to their creation, right? It wasn't until I said, you know what, maybe, not definitely, but maybe it could happen. Maybe I can take control here. The odds have to be greater than 0%, right? It's Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, it's like starting out, that's all you need, a chance, the door cracked. In the beginning, I just needed to convince myself something different was possible. The beginning of transformation and that internal change prompted how I interacted with the external world. You do things differently when you believe differently. Or, if you want to phrase it another way, believing that you can bring something to life doesn't guarantee that you actually do. But believing you can't guarantees that you won't. And why not stack the odds in your favor? I often juggle back and forth between the philosophical and the tangible or the tactical, right? 3 ways to do X. Life hack to change Y. Yeah, of course. Life does in so many ways come down to the tactics, to the how, to the steps. But does that even matter if you don't believe in the pursuit? Does it matter what Google Maps says if you never step out your front door? You have to convince you. You have to create an environment in your world where change isn't crazy, more isn't absurd. It might be challenging, but it's possible. And possible is enough. It is enough to begin, enough to step out, enough to see the trivialities as tools and the resistance as part of a beautiful game. Remember that the world is a mirror. reflecting back at us our worldview. We find what we look for, so give yourself permission to look for things that make life beautiful. Give yourself the gift of believing change is possible. You know, one of the hardest things to do is to walk away from a situation that's just okay. That's fine, it's doable, livable. There's an idea that the enemy of great isn't its inverse. The enemy of great is not average or insignificant or, throw in any similar word. No, the enemy of great is good. Why? Because it's incredibly easy to rationalize good. It's incredibly easy to sit back and tell yourself, hey, things aren't currently broken, so why touch them? Leave it alone. That's why it's a dangerous place to be. Comfort doesn't, on its own, initiate action or evolution. There has to be some sort of stressor to ignite the flame. And I'll get a response, every now and then, truly in good faith, asking, well, what's wrong with average? Why can't I just be? Not everyone can be LeBron James or Adele or Denzel Washington. Eddie, this convo sends people down a path of false hope. Well, hear me out, because I'm certainly not saying everyone can be LeBron James. But they can most definitely be LeBron James in their own world. And instead are settling for some sort of bench role. I'm not saying if you're not a movie star making $20 million a film, you've lost. I'm merely pointing out that perhaps you haven't even found the courage to star in your own movie. The one that is your life. And I can't speak for every human being on the planet here, but I most certainly can speak for myself. The easiest thing for me, the temptation I always find myself grappling with, is the temptation to stay where I am. To accept things as they are, pass change off as something that's just a little bit out of my control. That's what my lizard brain always seems to want. It's really nice to not have to feel the burden of knowing I can change things around me. Right? That prospect of creating my own friction, my own chaos, so that I can, in a sense, tame it and elevate myself. That can be overwhelming. That's stressful. But you know what it is at the end of the day? It's thrilling. It's meaningful. And it may have taken me years to understand, but I'd trade a safe life for a meaningful one any day. It was my coming to understand that statistically, we should not be here. The odds are so small that you're alive listening to this, that the word improbability doesn't do it justice. It's a miracle in every sense of the word. And so, what do we do about that? How do you explain a feeling? How do you explain the cost of not going, of fewer sunrises, less laughter, untapped creativity, unwalked paths, journeys never started? You can't. Which is why you have to go. Good is not detrimental because it's insufficient. It's detrimental because it gives you just enough to make stepping out into the world feel illogical. It's a warm blanket keeping you comfortable enough to forfeit that feeling you truly crave. And I hope it's clear my take in this is not that we aren't enough. It's that we have to be reminded that our biological compass points towards survival. And survival is a game of stagnation. Our souls, on the other hand, they need to run, to seek out the magnificence of life. And the more times we can be tapped on the shoulder and reminded of this, the better. See, I don't dream of new horizons because I'm ungrateful. I've learned to chase them down because I'm so grateful that I refuse to forfeit the gift. To leave my curiosity packaged and confined, I want to bask in life's abundance before my time here is up. And that's just it. That's the whole point. The friction between the knowing and the doing. Making that happen, physically bringing yourself there, it's not an easy thing. Certainly not as easy as putting your feet up and rationalizing the status quo. It's why I listen to voices that inspire me, read stories that teach me, I talk to people who lift me up. Going is harder than staying. But meaning resides in the going. So no, it's not about being LeBron James. It's about getting off the bench and at least shooting a shot. Whatever a shot means to you, wherever you are. Because if you don't, you'll never experience the thrill of having made one, of having felt that success. It's not about what you're doing, it's about what you're leaving on the table. Is average terrible? I don't know. Is a Ferrari never taken out of its garage terrible? Not really, it's still a Ferrari, but it won't experience the very thing that Ferrari was designed to experience. Again, how do you quantify that? You can't. Not until you go. So here's the stepping out of whatever the present definition of normalcy is in your world. Maybe not frantically changing the world around you, but certainly questioning the good, questioning yourself, questioning the road you're on. Has the routine overshadowed the reason you put the routine into place? Has the way things are come to outweigh the way you'd like them to be? Has good become a distraction, misdirecting you away from both life's brilliance and your own? I often ask myself, what differentiates those who wish for better outcomes and those who do something about it? What separates the dreaming from the progress and the wishing from the reality? Sure, life is complex. There are a lot of moving parts to understand. But I think this element is simple. Those who build things in life are willing to not only see a reality that hasn't yet materialized, but they also understand that in a world of no, they have to be the yes. They have to believe in their ability to drive towards finish lines that no one else sees. And see, meaning cannot come to fruition without that discomfort. Or as Nietzsche put it, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. And that's just it. Most people see what is. Most people conform. They do not create. change something means you have to be the metaphorical eagle amongst pigeons, flying above all that, everyone, everything else, superseding the limiting beliefs that shackle others to their one-dimensional realities. But most importantly, it means you can see. You can see what no one else can. You have line of sight to what no one else understands. See, in this world, no one walks up to you on the street, puts their arm around you and says, "Hey kid, that dream, follow that, because I can tell you're going to do big things." No one says, "Hey, that business idea, you're going to thrive next year, I know it. That relationship, it's going to happen. That level of fitness, oh, I can see it already." Nope. People see what's right in front of them. And as it pertains to you and your world, your life, people are those pigeons. And so that leaves you with a choice. Do you accept that? Do you blend in, take the scraps you're allowed to consume, the crumbs laid out in front of you? Or do you step back and acknowledge that this is going to be tough, this is going to hurt, it's going to push me further as a person than I've ever been pushed? But you know what I get in return? That view. I get to live above the clouds with those who don't wait in line. No, they become the main attraction. They transform what is into what will be, because the world, it has a way of ensuring that we really want what we say we do. Greatness in any area of life is reserved for those willing to carry forward when most would turn back, to build a bridge to something greater when most people point out that your bridge is not connected to anything, that it's a waste of time, it's trivial, useless, irrational. Good. Changing your life in the world around you has to be irrational. Taking the status quo and shaking it, saying, "I'm going to alter this landscape," is irrational. But from irrationality comes the future. So when you feel like the world is against you, when you have an uphill battle to climb, when there are a million reasons for you to turn around, understand that this is nothing more than an indicator that you are right where you need to be, against the current, bringing something new to life. See, if it were easy, it would already exist. But changing your life, that makes you an architect of the unseen. So build on the days you want to build, on the days you don't build. When they understand, build. And when they assume you've altogether lost your mind, build. Sure, it's not easy, but it's worth it. And when tomorrow comes, and it looks a lot different from today, when you've grown, evolved, transformed, and you look back and don't even recognize the person you once were, that won't be because you listened to the chirping of the doubters and the naysayers. It won't be because when strangers told you to give up, you packed your bags and went home. No, it will be because you rose above all that. They saw empty space and you saw a world undiscovered. They saw your head in the clouds while you built those castles in the air. You were always on a trajectory to something greater. You didn't need to convince them. You needed to convince yourself. To unlock the shackles and take to the sky, leave everything that once held you down behind. This isn't about anyone else. It's about the conversation between you and the horizon that awaits. For a second, imagine that feeling in your stomach. The nerves, the discomfort, maybe even the doubt as you walk up to do that one thing that scares you, that stretches you just a little bit further than you're ready for. And as you move towards that sort of dark unknown, the mysterious discomfort, what's on your mind? Are you starting to rationalize? Maybe you're asking yourself, hey, why did I do this to begin with? It seemed like a good idea at one point. It seemed bold and adventurous. But now it seems like the wheels have hit the road and the narrative is shifting in real time. So try and recreate that feeling for a second. Looking fear in the eyes. Capture what it means physically, mentally. Right, for me, it was public speaking. Right, half a decade ago, standing backstage, palms sweating, little voice in my head saying, "Hey Ed, cubicle doesn't seem so bad right now, does it, genius?" Maybe, for you in this scenario, it's that big test that feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Everything's on the line. Maybe it's something like starting a conversation with a complete stranger, interview for a job you want, starting line of a race, having the courage to speak your mind online. Maybe it's doing something your family doesn't quite get or your friends won't understand, cutting ties with what's comfortable, a decision to be what you've always wanted to be. There's a million possibilities. Right? There's a lot of fear that we dance with on a day-to-day basis. But in that moment, as your feet start moving in the very direction that will bring your ideas closer to your reality, and you're hit with that same feeling, that wall that tells us something isn't quite right, that's what I want to discuss. Because it's hard to be met with this feeling and still move confidently in the same direction, right? There's cognitive dissonance there. How can something feel wrong and be right? Should there be disconnect? It's funny, I really enjoy reading quotes, and particularly Lewis Carroll has resonated with me over the years. Things he said in his works, they're witty, they're funny, but they're powerful. And one in particular stood out to me. It's why sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. I just loved the concept, the idea of immersing yourself, in the impossible, in the difficult, the thing that's not right in front of you, but sort of creating it as you go. So I got through The Looking Glass and Adventures of Alice in Wonderland, and it was an interesting read. I'm not sure I'd recommend it for everyone, but there was certainly one thing that popped out at me that I found incredibly valuable. And it was in Alice's journey holistically, right? So she goes into this rabbit hole, and the world is basically upside down. Nothing is as it was before she jumped. Nothing really makes sense. And what you see is her progression as a character, as she starts continually embracing the thing that feels abnormal, upside down and weird. But with each decision to move forward, she completely redefines this insane world that wasn't particularly warm and receptive to Alice to begin with. As she stands up to a queen running around ordering executions, she navigates a world with new rules and guidelines. She transforms the boundaries that used to define reality. And what I think is valuable is that there really wasn't this boom, transformative moment where everything changes. She just keeps subtly saying yes. She keeps moving forward without knowing for sure how things will work out or unfold, as if she's supposed to. And she becomes so accustomed to suppressing that feeling of fear and uneasiness that it almost becomes comical. She goes with it and becomes the author of a new story. She becomes untouchable in this world. And my point here, and for those of you not a fan of Alice in Wonderland, I appreciate you hanging on, but where these dots connect is that it's actually a pretty simple idea. Life unfolds in a way that is unimaginable when we shift our thinking from, oh no, here comes that feeling in my stomach again, my heart's pounding, my palms are sweating, so I've wandered too far. When you change that to, here comes that feeling in my stomach, heart pounding, palms sweating, so here comes the beginning of something incredible, life shifts. See, it's not running from that temporary feeling of fear and discomfort, but harnessing it. It's a weapon, it's a tool, right? It fuels the rocket ship headed to the moon. It's the water that seed of opportunity is dependent upon. And sure, it feels new and unsettling, and yeah, it's uncomfortable, but so is, as we learn, everything good. And sure, you could turn back. You could avoid that manufactured confrontation altogether, but man, you have to be okay never knowing what those peaks could have been. You have to be content imagining a life of adventure and not living it. And to me, that's a much steeper price. Right? Because that feeling of fear in your stomach, it's temporary, it goes away, but the feeling of knowing you walked away when life held out its hand and offered you more, that doesn't go away. And see, I look at it like this. Two things change every time you say yes. Every time you acknowledge the organized chaos and move forward anyway, you move both your internal and external worlds one step forward. Internal, because life is your identity. And as has been said before, humans always follow through on who they believe they are. I've heard actors saying the most important decision they make is the shoes they put on, because it lays the groundwork for how you feel. You just feel differently about yourself in clown shoes than you would in basketball shoes than you would in dress shoes. You feel different about yourself in a suit than you would in sweatpants. And this doesn't mean go reassess your wardrobe. It highlights how malleable identity is. Yeah, we follow through on who we believe we are, but the powerful thing is who we believe we are is created every single day. Every time we use fear to propel us forward, right? Your subconscious goes, okay, that's who I am. Someone who does the uncomfortable things, someone who is okay with fear, that's me. Right? And that's the internal foundation that means everything. That's how identity is constructed. And if you stack that up with action every single day, you won't even be able to recognize yourself. That's the internal transformation. Then there's the external transformation. Every time you push through fear, you level up, not significantly. Right? You aren't immediately transformed. In fact, sometimes you don't even notice. But the truth is, after you say yes, after you take that step, you're fractionally further than a few minutes earlier. Your relative ceiling is now the floor, and it's time to take another step. This is how you create distance over time. So when you hear the word fear, let's rewire that reaction. Let's change how we think about it. Because it's not a monster in the closet. It's not some demon staring you in the face. No, it's a ticket to something more, something to be embraced and coveted. It's the next little step in your journey, and why when most of the world bows down to that feeling of discomfort or instability and stays the same, you will have moved forward. Not in a single leap, but a step that over time will become the reason that at some point, when you look over your shoulder, you'll find a life, a world, a reality that is unrecognizable in the context of where you began. It's why fear is not to be avoided or even tolerated, but sought out as the single variable that puts a pulse in your aspirations, gives hope to your dreams. The ideal life is not predicated on the avoidance of fear, but the ability to harness and capitalize on its power. Dream away, because dreams remind us of hope. Hope that becomes courage. Courage that manifests itself in little steps forward. Steps that over time create a new world that looks a lot different than the one you once knew. So dream away. Dream away, because we have all been blessed with the ability to take nothings and make them somethings. We've all been given the power to take blank spaces and make them landscapes, to see with our eyes worlds that aren't yet there. And what a shame it would be to repress that gift, to label it fiction, to keep it next to our books and our movies. How much a tragedy to allow it to be merely a temporary escape, instead of the permanent beginning it was meant to be. So dream away. Let it lead you, because dreams, they'll either become the stories we tell or the regrets we hide away. A personal evolution or untapped potential. The reason we jump out of bed in the morning, or the reason we keep our eyes closed, clinging to the last few seconds of joy before we confine ourselves to the self-made prisons we built, the invisible walls that separate what we see from the possibility a short trip away. But look around you, one might say. This is reality. And this looks a lot different than the dreams that bounce around in my head. If dreaming was some magic formula, I'd be there already. Well, magic isn't quite my claim. No, dreams are not magic. I think their composition is so simple, so practical, so obtainable that magic, it isn't needed here. In fact, thinking dreams require some larger-than-life magic might just be the problem. Dreams require a willingness to start and a single step forward. The rest we figure out along the way. Every little decision to carry on through the haze of that great unknown. That's where we discover life's possibility. And if that's magic, then my friend, we are all magicians. Okay, he might inquire further, but is any of it guaranteed? Well, that's a highly complex question as we make our way through this highly complex world. But I will do this. I'll guarantee one thing and one thing only. If you do not dream of better tomorrows, today will be eternal. Things will stay exactly as they are now. See, your dream is the North Star that guides the path. The target calling the arrows, it's the lighthouse that brings the ship home from sea. Without a foundation to build upon, you'll have nothing to stand on. So instead of talking about guarantees, let's talk about lost opportunity cost. Let's talk about what happens if you don't go, if you don't explore, if you don't build. What will you miss? See, most people, they only understand what has already been created. Let's not be most people. Why stay in the lines when there's nothing else to discover? Why black and white when color changes the dynamic entirely? The greatest enemy of possibility, of potential, is one's need for certainty. It's the person who talks about something more but knows something more will remain an afterthought. Because as beautiful as it sounds, it's not guaranteed. And because they cannot guarantee something better, they will guarantee the status quo. But I'm asking you to see the flaws in that line of thinking. I'm asking you to understand that our very biology cries out for safety. That we have to fight our urge to settle. our desire to take the monster we know over the one we don't, because it's the monsters we don't know that put meaning into life. It's the journey that elevates the destination, and while it might feel like what you want in the short term, that long term, it sings a different tune. To get where you need to go, you have to move into the headwind that is the comfort of now. Find within yourself the courage to simply crack the door, to just let a little bit of light in and see how it forces its way into every corner of your soul. Once you feel that satisfaction of progress, you'll be consumed, pulled in, as though the only thing larger than fear of failure is the rush of becoming who you were meant to be. I once heard something that changed the way I looked at the world. Something simple, the idea that we don't climb the mountain for the view. We climb mountains because of who we become on the journey up. The view is merely representative of that journey. The dream isn't in and of itself the goal. It's an invitation to immerse yourself in all that is beautiful, meaningful, worthwhile, jaw-dropping, eye-opening, and powerful. It is what cracks that door and lets the light in. So dream away. Because that dream, it's no threat to your safety. It's what will ultimately save you. So dream away. Dream away so that you capture that sunrise you were given. Dream away so that you are pulled to that which makes life worth living. Dream away so that you never lose that child inside. So that you don't leave the adventure on the table and keep your ideal existence on the shelf. Dream away so that you see the abundance that surrounds us, the hope within us, and the future that calls us for yourself, the people in your life, and the ones who eventually will be. Dream away. There's a quote from Naval Ravikant. He says, "The closer you are to the truth, the more silent you become inside." Found that interesting. Got an email recently from someone asking for my thoughts about their being overlooked for a promotion at their work. They say that they're dedicated, they work hard, they show up and execute. So what does the act of being overlooked mean? Well, like so many things, it's contextual, but let's play with it, right? What does feedback ever really mean? It means what you decide it does. Here's how I see the act of being overlooked, as this person expresses. Let's look at it as an iceberg, that rejection as a floating block of ice in the Atlantic, and the top, the piece that's exposed and above water, the smaller piece, is your chance to look around and self-reflect, to ask why. Where are the places I could strengthen myself? The gaps I could close and the spaces I could occupy. You know, disappointment, it causes us to self-reflect, and that can be a valuable thing. There are often tangible, quantifiable reasons we didn't hit the mark, and I think that top of the iceberg is our recognition that we have things to do, places to go, and what better a time than now to start moving in that direction. Now, the part of the iceberg underneath the water, supporting all that, there has to be a foundation of self-belief, of self-trust. Not only a hardness and understanding that you are not defined by rejection, but also a certainty that things will work out. That you might have to stumble, fall, even aimlessly wander for a set period of time. But when your focus is on a particular North Star and you are serious about it, committed to it, you'll find a way. And being overlooked in any capacity is not defining, because right now is not an end. You decide where the end is. And there just so happens to be a lot of space between that point and where you stand now. The vast majority of an iceberg exists under the surface, and that's valuable here, because I believe that the differentiator when it comes to success and failure is how one internalizes the process and their place within it. If you know you're going to succeed, if you are confident in yourself and who you are, then the little wins and losses along the way tend to mean less. Getting overlooked in any capacity is a nice little bit of feedback, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't hold the weight we tend to give it when we're less sure of ourselves and the process. So let's get back to the quote. The closer you are to the truth, the more silent you become inside. Well, here Naval is stating in one of his podcast episodes that the wiser someone becomes, the more quiet or stoic they become. Referring to the character that I allude to all the time in this podcast, the loudest person at the table, right? Always talking or seeking attention. Often this character is overcompensating for something. And that's what Naval is, in my opinion, properly stating. But I want to hijack the quote a little bit, because I think this applies to our own mental chatter as well. When we are sure of ourselves and what we're doing, the internal dialogue is reduced. When we believe ourselves to be correct and in line with our values and our vision, the mind tends to be calmer. And I can use this YouTube channel and podcast as an easy example. Right? I have self-belief when it comes to my ability to do this. I've invested years and years and believe that over time it's become a strength of mine. So when that inevitable negative feedback or comment comes in, which happens, right? It's the internet. I take it for what it is. It's the tip of the iceberg. I assess whether there's any value to be extracted, and if there is, I put it in my back pocket. But the point is, I then move on. Because underneath the surface, under that tip of the iceberg, there is such a substantial amount of self-belief and determination in the process that negativity, it means very little. It doesn't define me. And that's the point that I aspire to cling to. And conversely, as counterintuitive as it seems, I think we should be the same way with positive feedback. Right? Like when nice things are said, it makes us feel good and we should be grateful, sure. But the idea is the same. Examine, pocket the feedback, and move on. Because if we rely too extensively on good feedback for our self-worth and our sense of identity, it's going to be hard to avoid doing the same thing when the other stuff comes in. It's about having a vision and trusting yourself, right? This is not you versus the world. This is you versus you, and we can't forget that. It's a person committed, determined, on fire in their purpose, collecting data along the way to something greater. And look, sometimes that data comes in the form of being overlooked. It highlights ways you need to make yourself stronger and better. But sometimes it validates and recognizes your greatness, the value you're already adding to the world. Either way, you're moving forward because it's who you are. And as long as you tell yourself you're going to win, and those 2 feet underneath you haven't stopped moving, you're putting yourself in position to capitalize on all the opportunity life has to provide. You are going to see the compounding of all those steps you took. The ones you took when it hurt, and the ones you took when it didn't. When you were sure and when you weren't. When you had all the energy in the world and when you barely got yourself through. All those times, they mean something. And it's the ability and desire to move forward regardless that becomes the determining factor. If you know that, the mind can be at peace. Life is happening for you, not to you. The obstacles become much needed information, and the victories further contribute to your momentum. It's all moving you closer to where you need to be. There's a saying by Steve Martin. He says, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And that's not a point, it's a process, an evolution. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes self-belief. But trusting that mountaintop you're chasing also comes with a great sense of security. That this epic adventure is yours and yours alone. It comes with discovery, growth, joy, sadness, and everything in between, but it is yours. And if you sign that dotted line, it doesn't matter if you are overlooked in some capacity. No person or external event can take away what you know in your soul to be true.